Thanks for joining us today on Coastal Progressive and Rainbow Forum on Society Bites Radio. Today we will be speaking with Dr. Will Tyson, and we are so happy to have you, Will. We have got a great subject to talk about today. We're going to be talking about Mayor Pete and his run for the presidency. Dr. Tyson, please tell us a little bit about your background for Mayor Pete.
Sure. I'm a professor in sociology at the University of South Florida. I guess I've been a Pete supporter for probably about a year now. I knew a little bit about him before he entered the race. I remember he came and did a visit in the Tampa Bay area, I think around the in the lead up to the 2018 election. So I learned a little bit about his bio then, and I vaguely remember him running for DNC chair. And he has very, very impressive credentials. And I was really intrigued at the idea, well, obviously, of an openly gay candidate, which somehow we've forgotten how revolutionary and new that is. But also just his general bio and impressive credentials at such an early age. I'm in my early 40s, so the idea of a candidate younger than me, this is really kind of the first cycle where that's even really possible. And so it was very intriguing to see him enter the race. And as I learned about him through, his first few weeks of interviews back when he still kind of goes on every possible show he can. I was extremely impressed by his kind of knowledge and acute vision and awareness of where this country is and how important this election is, not just about addressing really the horrors of the Trump administration, but also changing course from 40 years of conservatism. Really, that's all I know. I grew up in the Reagan era. My first memory from politics is feeling kind of this, I will never forget this feeling of kind of overwhelming sadness watching the 1980 election returns. I was a little boy, but I do remember I really liked Jimmy Carter, and I was really sad to see him lose. And that's a sadness that has been justified as Reagan ushered in this 40 years of conservatism. And as Pete says, we need to decide what the next 40 years will be. Is this going to be 40 years of fascism, or are we going to change course and usher in a, really a more progressive era of politics?
Will, I think some of our listeners need to be brought up to date too on Mayor Pete's incredible credentials he's got. He has absolutely probably one of the most stellar resumes behind his name of any candidate running. And he is a Rhodes Scholar, am I correct?
Yes.
And he served in Afghanistan, I believe, with the military?
In the Navy. Yes.
In the Navy, okay. And plus that, his IQ level and his ability to communicate with people and his grasp of the facts and issues is just absolutely astounding. The points that I think that a lot of people fail to realize, that he is it's his youth and his the refreshing change of our, I guess, like you said here, conservatism into a era when we might be able to bring the country together on a whole range of issues. And right. He certainly has the background to do this, I believe. He is not too far to the left or too far to the right. He is more in the center, and that's what the country needs, I think, at this point, and like a lot of people think. And we have to be careful, that he can implement many of the things that they want on the left and on the right, and still do it in a way that it's with a human face. I like that saying when I was in Europe. I've lived overseas a number of years, and when people heard say with capitalism with a human face, and that's what a lot of people have forgotten, how The economy right now at this point, I'm sure, and he knows this too, as you do. The economy may be great if you're rich right now, or you're making money that way, but for a lot of the working people, it is not a good economy, and
Right.
and they suffer. They really do suffer under the situation, and it is an important thing that people need to realize. And some of his ideas and his ways of doing things, I think, are just astounding. And I want you to, if you could think about just a couple here to highlight a couple of some major issues that you think that would be people need to be aware about his background and his plans to do some things here. I think that would be very positive. You can pick out maybe. I liked his answer when they've had debates sometimes, on the health care issue. Some people, they're happy with their health care, and he said, Medicare for people who need it or want it, and
Right.
that I think that was a great solution. Can you give us fill me in here on some of this and our listeners too, okay?
Well, I think one thing, a few things in response to what you said. I would say that Pete's platform is plenty to the left. I mean, it's in the center compared to who he's running against. But
right.
I mean, if Pete is the nominee, he will be the most progressive presidential general election candidate that we've ever had, and it's not even close. I mean, he is. I don't like really using left and right, but his politics and his policies are more progressive than really any other candidate we've had before this election, except maybe Bernie Sanders in 2016. And so, when people talk about him as a moderate, I actually think it speaks well to how well he communicates his ideas to a broader audience. Because I think a lot of people forget that the Democratic Party is a very broad coalition. We talk about the diversity of the party, but it's also quite diverse in terms of political orientation. While we've seen Republicans rush hard to the far right, the Democratic Party is a loose coalition of people really who can consider themselves progressive, liberal, moderate, even conservative, because the Democratic Party is really a home for people from marginalized groups who the Republican Party really has no place for. And so, people are somewhat astounded, for example, when candidates, I would say people who consider themselves liberal are somewhat sometimes astounded when they see that candidates they brand as more conservative doing well with Black and Latino voters, for example. Well, that's because conservative Black voters are Democrats, and conservative Latino voters, many of them are Democrats. Religious voters who are minorities tend to be Democrats. And so it's a very big tent, and Pete has done a great job of presenting traditionally progressive policies to a broader audience. And part of what he's trying to do is provide a bridge. This is his part of his logo is that bridge in South Bend. He's trying to provide a bridge for people who have never considered themselves to be Democrats for whatever reason to come over to the Democratic side because they're disillusioned with where the Republican Party is. He's even trying to provide a bridge for people who may have supported Trump in the last election simply because they didn't like Hillary or don't like the Democratic Party as a whole to come over and join him. And so I think that's one thing that really stands out for me. And the other thing that really stands out with respect to his policies is more than any other candidate, he's concerned with how to get things done. It's because Pete realizes you can have all the ideas in the world, but unless you have a method for getting it done that people are going to get behind, during that process, it's not going to turn out right. I mean, Personally, I would love to have Medicare for all. I think it's, the ideas that have come forth from Sanders and Warren, I think they are good ideas. But I realize, having lived through the struggles of ACA or Obamacare, that there will you will not get Republicans on board at all. That's just not going to happen. So then you have to work at getting a broad coalition of Democrats on board. And you have to face the possibility that there's going to be people, whether they are people in red states or people who are Republicans who are either resistant to the truth or have no idea what the truth is because they don't access it in their immediate diet. They're just not going to accept a Medicare for all plan. And what Pete has come up with is a way to make sure that people who want the benefits of universal health care can access it without getting stymied by those who don't. And I think there is a brilliance to that if he wins the nomination, I think he'll be able to get people who currently reject that idea. I think he'll be able to get them on board. Because once we get into a general election cycle and Pete starts getting the heat from the right, people will realize that you just don't stroll into Washington and change health care without getting a lot of resistance. I don't know how people have forgotten this lesson from the first term of the Obama administration, but somehow people have.
Exactly.
Because even then, people had forgotten the lesson we learned from the first term of the Bill Clinton administration. You just don't waltz in and change health care. And so you got to have a plan that's going to bring people along. And, we tend to use the term I'm about to use in a derogatory way, but Pete is hand-holding the American public. He's he's holding their hand, he's grabbing their shoulders and say, hey, let's come along together for a better future. We can do this together. You come along when you want to, okay? If you're not ready, that's fine. We're going to go. We're going to lead the way. We're going to show you what a better future can be. And when you're ready to come along with us, you can join in too. And, I think that's a good way to present progressive politics. It's a way to get around the idea that, the left is just trying to use big government to force things on you, which, we know for the most part that's not really true. But Pete's he's figured out how to present things in a more accommodating way. And, I understand the criticism that, Medicare for all who want it is a half measure. I understand that criticism, but it's the most likely pathway to something really good that can transform our economy, transform our health outcomes, and really open up the possibilities of what we can do. Because, going forward, you were talking about the economy, for example, and how the economy doesn't work for everybody.
Amen.
but we're reaching a point where too many people don't see an alternative. Like, this is the system that we have. This is the system that we've had for going on 40 years. And it doesn't take long for things to change and for people to get used to something as normal. And we've gotten used to this new normal in which there are very few people hoarding almost all the resources. And most of everybody else is basically making enough money to just survive so they can continue to work to make those people rich. And that's the system that we've got now. And that's what our economy is. It hasn't always been that way, but that's what we have right now. And another term of Trump, another term of the Republicans being in charge, and it's going to be that much harder to transform that economy and get people thinking about, hey, what if I had a job where I could actually save some money? What if I had a